out and reading stories from all over the internet. And this was a request, but kind of a hard one to find new information on or new material because there are not that many real stories that actually discuss the skinwalkers due to the beliefs that they should not ever be spoken of. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of New Mexico. We deliver small packages to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the commercial delivery companies. My father is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks that we have and a small trailer. One day, we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona, on the sparsely populated and hugely vast Navajo reservation, 2 hours from Farmington, New Mexico. My dad gets the call for the job while he is hanging out with his Navajo friend and his girlfriend. His friend mentions how he's got family in Window Rock and he hasn't seen them for ages and would love to go with my father. I was 6 or 7 at the time. It was the summertime, and Dad decided that we'd all go down together. He can do his delivery really quick. Then while his friend is seeing his family, we can go check out the Window Rock, big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side, which is really neat. We had to drive in separate trucks since my dad was loaded down with the heavy freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so it would make it easier to communicate with each other, which is extremely a brilliant idea. Now, we spend our time in Window Rock, Arizona. Everything uneventful up to this moment, until we start heading home along the old deserted highway. My dad driving in front with me and his friend and girlfriend in their own trucks behind us. Honestly, I can't remember most of that Window Rock trip, but this part I will never, ever, ever forget. So now we are somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico, which is an extremely deserted part of the state. I have been there many, many times, and talk about scary. It is terrifying. It had rained earlier in the day, the road was slick, and we were driving fairly slow. The left of the highway, nothing but sandstone cliffs. Right of the highway is a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. As we crest the top of this hill and head down to the bottom, up, we see what appears initially to be a large dog on its haunches, sitting up right in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs, staring off listlessly. My dad reaches see that big ass dog? His friend starts yelling back over the radio, that is not a goddamn dog. Speed up right now and hit it, hit it, hit it. He sounds hysterical. He keeps screaming, hit it. You have to hit it, please, please hit that fucking thing right now. My dad, frightened by his friend's words, speeds up as we get listening to my uncle sing an old prayer till we got to my grandmother's house. I phoned my uncle after I had a nightmare about that night. We did discuss it for a little bit. He said, I didn't see faces, just eyes, like brake lights you see on the road. The thing watched you. Before hanging up, I tried to joke with him about it. Why didn't you just step on the brakes when it was in the back? There was no laughter or humor coming back through his voice on the other end of the line, with just a pause, and then my uncle's voice sincerely and horrifically saying, because it was not alone. It was not alone. Don't get off of the bus, my iron_Jesus. Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has probably heard of some odd, creepy things that have happened or have experienced the horrifying reality of the Skinwalkers. I've only seen one, and here is my story. I was brought up in a small town in northern Arizona that is sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation to the north and the U.S. largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school was so small, an A1A high school that has on average 80 students enrolled every year, always traveled south 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This would mean that we traveled many, many times on the Navajo reservation. We also usually stayed at a hotel when we would head out to play and come home in the morning. However, this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school did not have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel on this specific trip. We were going to be on the road for a total of 12 hours because we could not stay the night. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and we were heading home on our bus, quote unquote, the Big Blue. We were headed out. Wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving before we entered the reservation. By this time, everyone was asleep, being around 2 in the morning. When we crossed the reservation border, I noticed the bus driver sped up and now was going around 85 miles per hour. When we had crossed, why was he doing this? I really thought this was a little odd because he would never exceed the speed limit. Oh, at least not in my high school career. I always sat up front and to the right. It was quiet, more comfortable, and I could get on and off the bus easier. So I knew how this driver would drive, but for some reason, this drive I could not fall asleep like the rest of my teammates. I sat at the back of the bus this time, this night, out of my different seat position. And I was staring across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. The bus's speed was increasing to the point I felt it kind of swerve it was keeping up with the bus at least 85 miles per hour. This dark figure got closer. I saw that this was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, this thing looked exactly like a human, only the face was painted half black and half white, and the eyes glowed. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, shit, it's a skinwalker. The skinwalker is out. He's chasing us. This thing ran up to the edge of the road and kept pace with the bus, hurdling sagebrush and rocks, staring at me. I made eye contact with the thing, and I could not look away. I was frozen. Something was holding my head and eyes in place. This skinwalker just smiled at me with an inhuman smile which went ear to ear, showing crooked, yellow, pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up. I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumble down on all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could physically see the bones cracking and reforming. Hair started appearing all over the skinwalker's body, and in about 3 seconds was now a coyote. Ran off back to the desert night, out of view. As soon as this thing was gone, I ran to the bathroom on board and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear they would think I was losing my mind. I did confide in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like object, turned around, got in his truck, and drove away. To this day, I have not seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact I moved away from that town and that reservation. If I go down to the south, I go around, way, way around, as to avoid any confrontations with another one. From Redditor, you Nordic alchemist. Many might know already that Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from Navajo Nation and was very naive about the subject. When talking about skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mother used to tell us stories of how back in the 80s, during the time she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, who are still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts. She and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a street light. Her description of this thing was a black dog with dirty, twisted noodle, like fur matted in some grimy substance, a crooked and pinch-torn, wedged front leg, almost like a spun noodle, unnatural eyes, a soft, burnt orange glow speaking of them, they are real, alright. And a few started screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying that morning. My heart kind of skipped a beat, not wanting to push the discomfort of the entire family any further. We all decided to go to bed. Now the trailer home is pretty old and was really a beautiful night. We slept with the windows open, only screens to prevent the bugs from coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except for me, because my mind was buzzing about 1,000,000 miles a minute. What were skinwalkers, and wonder if I ever encountered one while here on the reservation. As a kid, I was told it's taboo to think about skinwalkers because I can still call their attention. That's when shit hit the fan. I was settling. Finally, my mind relaxed enough for sleep. I start to hear movement outside my window. I cautiously get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window and the trailer. All of the rooms have the lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself, if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it would not notice me seeing it. I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of the outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove along, with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road, looking for about a good 5 to 15 seconds. I was not able to see anything. I was getting ready to turn around, walk back to my bed, thinking it was just a stray cat or something silly. I had only taken 2 steps. I hear what sounds like a distorted scream coming from outside, definitely close by. Fear is rising into my throat. I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure staring in my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only something was awfully wrong. This was an evil vibe that it gave off. I could feel it in my soul. Gray hair. Matted this creature's coat. They made my heart feel like stopping, and the smell of rotting meat emanated from this creature. I tried waking up my mom, who yelled at me, yelling, "It's almost 3 a.m., what do you want?" In a shaking voice, I say, "There's something outside." Then she said, now pretty pissed, I woke her up, "It's probably just a stray animal or something. It's a reservation. Animals wander all the time at night." She wasn't getting the drift. So I scream, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going on, Mom." That got her attention. What? What the hell are you talking about? Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more dreadful screams. Started what sounded like thrashing on the ground. Do you hear that? That's what I'm talking about. Both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and this coyote thing was making personal items that my family had left in the vehicle. My aunt and uncles were frightened by the sight, and I knew that they should take some sort of action. They took out the rifle and all steadied themselves to hold this thing up. They flung open the door and aimed the gun at the dark figure. This figure turned and stared at us, then started to walk towards them, totally unfazed. staring them down, and suddenly kicked one of them. They all scattered in different directions. The thing then flicks his eyes up towards me, and I see his face. Pure white face like a full moon, two burning red eyes, and a slight sinister smile, pure black. I could not move or make a sound. This enormous thing began to walk towards me with long, odd strides until finally it was towered over me. All I could see was a dark red, like the color of blood when you cut the throat of a sheep. I kept falling deeper and deeper into this thing's eyes. I could faintly hear my brother coming out of the outhouse with this thing looking up at him. Reality rushed back into my body. I noticed that my brother was too distracted with his buckle to realize what was going on. I also noticed this thing's long hands hovered just inches from my head. Its skin was black ash. It smelled like a bloated dead animal in summer. I, unable to move or speak. It was a skinwalker. I knew it. It began to move towards my brother. Finally noticing this figure, my brother became paralyzed as I had been. Closer it drew to my brother, reaching out an arm towards his head. Something snapped in my mind. I became unbearably outraged. I broke from the trance and lunged at this thing, raising my arms like a wild animal and baring my teeth at it. A growl came out that I never knew I could actually make. I became more angry at this thing that was trying to kill us. But that her life. Minutes passed. The Skinwalker appears to have left. My aunt hops back in the driver's seat and gets the van, eventually to start. And they go. Out of sight, dude. When trading stories around a campfire, my friend recalled an encounter he had while serving an LDS mission. My friend's mission region had a reservation within its boundaries. However, this was relatively far from where he was serving. On one occasion, he and his mission companion were asked to travel further than they usually would to meet with some investigators. This took them near the reservation. On their way home, their car ran out of gas. Wasn't until late at night that they were able to continue the journey home. My friend, who was driving while his companion slept in the passenger seat, took a different route that took him through back roads in an attempt to get home a little quicker. He told us he was driving above the speed limit when he noticed movement in his peripheral in the woods lining the road. Coyotes were common in the area, so that's what he thought he was. He took little notice at first. Then he looked out the window and slammed on his brakes. The sudden stop jolted his companion awake, who immediately wanted to know what was wrong. My friend, shaking, terrified, and unable to speak, told him he would tell him once they got home safely. He asked him to just start to pray. By the time they made it home, his companion was dying to know what the hell had happened. My friend told him, I looked down at the road next to the car, saw 6 men running on all fours, keeping up with the car at 40 miles an hour. Predator, you fireclaw is wood. My mother's side has always been very, very superstitious. For lack of a better explanation, she's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal. Her mother was full-blooded Navajo and her father was Irish. Either way, she had never been anywhere east of Montana. She grew up in Nevada. One year, when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visit, pretty uneventful, typical boring old people stuff. Except she always kept her curtains drawn shut and peek out of the window. When someone asked what she was doing, she would simply reply in Andalusian, "She is watching me." This went on for the entire visit until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma soon as this thing passed, the same agonizing scream played again, 10 times louder. My dad pressed the accelerator to the floor and they got the hell out of there. Luckily, they never saw this thing again. Render naked Reagan. A story my roommate had told me a few times. I want to see if anyone else out there has had similar experiences. As he tells the story, he was driving home extremely late at night, 3 or 4 in the morning, in a suburb of Phoenix. Both times that this occurred. The first time he was driving alone on a road that has an open field to the left, when out of nowhere a black figure on all fours bounds out of the field across the road directly in front of his car. As soon as this dark figure got to the other side of the road, it stops with inhuman quickness, turns around, looks directly at my roommate, described the figure as looking simian, completely black except the face. The creature's face was a stark white human face, not white as in Caucasian, but white as snow. This happened again a few weeks later, but this time the creature is sitting in a tree hunched over, waiting for my friend's car to approach. As his car started to get closer, this thing climbed down the tree super fast, bound across the road, stopped on a dime and turned around, this time making eye contact with him. Now, this second time he had a friend in the car who also saw it, and both of them began freaking out. It was the same thing as the first time, simian black body with a snow-white, expressionless human face. My roommate, ever the curious one,